Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grace Every Day, a podcast for Christian wives and blue collar guys. Today's podcast is all about letting go. The reason that I think this topic is just resonating with me lately, a couple of years ago, my grandmother passed away, and she, just the emotional aspect of losing her in itself was really impactful. Was really difficult. It was a tough thing to lose her. She's been one of those relationships in my life of just, she was always one of those relationships in my life that was just a cheerleader for me, a supporter, an encourager. And so, I certainly still miss her a lot. But as after she passed, we went through the process that happens when a life comes to a close. Getting rid of her things. A lot of her personal things had to be sorted through. What do you do with those things? Cleaning out the house, everything from years and years of Christmas cards that she had saved and memorabilia that was impactful for her and important to her, letters and correspondence and pictures and more pictures. Pictures of people I didn't even know. I couldn't have told you who they were. Pictures that obviously were people she knew, but years and years later, I certainly didn't know who some of those people were. And just books and records and a lot of the things that just she had accumulated over the course of a very full and blessed lifetime. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of times we as people hold on to a lot of stuff for one reason or another. And sometimes we need to recognize that letting go of some of that stuff would serve us better. Now, that could happen in any season of life. It might be that you just want to go through your closet and go, hey, I haven't worn this blouse in 10 years. It's time to rehome that blouse. It's time to get rid of that blouse and let someone else enjoy it. The pants that no longer fit, the clothes that are maybe out of style, and so you don't wear them because you feel like they don't fit your style anymore. They don't fit who you are in this season of life. I recently had to come to the recognition. I was like going through my closet and clothes, things that I haven't worn in a while, and things that I've bought. And then now I look at this season of my life and go, this is just really not reflective of who I am. This shirt is cut in a different style than I maybe would wear, or maybe it's just a little lower cut than I might wear these days. Whatever it is, right? Recognizing that sometimes the things hanging in our closet are things we just need to let go of. But it's not just clothes, although sometimes that's a big part of us, especially for us as women. But just sorting through a lot of the things for my grandmother. And again, it was emotional just to go through that process and sort out her personal things and clean out everything from makeup and clothes and shoes and what do you do with all of that? And you don't want to feel guilty about not just keeping all of the keepsakes that were important to her, but recognizing I don't have room to keep all of the keepsakes that were important to her. And so honoring her memory and, honoring her things and that whole process just is a process, both emotionally to work through. And again, trying to honor that and respect that, and then not feel guilty because you can't keep everything. You do have to sort through, what can go to a charity or something and can be used by somebody else and enjoyed by somebody else. And then, you walk through that whole thing through the kitchen and dishes and knickknacks and keepsakes. And, she had always kept like a coat that was my grandfather's. He passed away several years before she did. And so she had a couple of pieces of clothing that were his. And so, it was just a lot to sort through that. So my whole point is that sometimes we need to take a good look at our own life, our own situation, and learn to let go of some of the stuff. And so, I know that whole experience made me look at things that I keep. Just memorabilia and little cards and little note cards and birthday cards. And, it's funny because I would have told you that I'm not really a keeper of stuff. Like I don't just collect stuff. But after I walked through that whole process of dealing with her loss and, clearing out her estate, I realized I have a lot of stuff. And so now I'm getting very intentional about maybe I need to get rid of some of the stuff, but more so, how can I be more intentional in the future about not getting more stuff? Mac and I had many years ago early in our marriage, we started collecting shot glasses, as just keepsakes from places we'd gone on vacation. And, that was back when we took like one vacation a year. We only went one place a year because that's all we had time in vacation time to do. And of course, these days we travel quite a bit more extensively. We've gone to some really cool places, but we were asking ourselves, after clearing out so much of my grandmother's things, do we need a shot glass from every single place that we go? And who's going to deal with those shot glasses when we're no longer around, right? And so, again, everyone has to come to that decision for themselves, but, recognizing that just the stuff in life isn't what makes us happy, right? That's not what brings us joy. I counted them up because I was just recently cleaning all the shot glasses and dusting them and all that, and I counted them up. We've got over 100 at this point, and some of them are really cool trips. They bring back really cool memories, and some of them I'm like, the shot glass is neat, but I don't really remember anything about that trip. I'm gonna have to go get the pictures to remember what was cool about the trip. And of course, all the pictures are digital these days. So again, my point being, are there things in our life? Is there an area of stuff that we've just collected that we need to let go of, or we need to decrease or minimize? This could be, we're kind of talking about physical things, and physical things just don't bring you joy. Now, they can be keepsakes, they can be mementos. And there are mementos that I will keep from experiences that I'm not going to get rid of. But am I going to continue to buy a souvenir shot glass from every place we go on vacation? So I have to be intentional about that. And it's made me much more aware. That whole process of closing up a life and a house and, going through all of those things and that whole experience really brought that level of awareness to my mind that the stuff in and of itself is not what makes us happy. And, sometimes we hold on to it just for that satisfaction of holding on to something. And I think I had a little bit of that tendency, probably 20 years ago. After I left home with a duffel bag and a pillowcase stuffed with clothes, and not much more. Now, I did get a few more of my things over the next couple of weeks, when my parents were still trying to get me to come back. Like, they would give me, a few, like I got some of my CDs and some of my jewelry, some of the things that I didn't take with me after I initially left home. But overall, I left a large percentage of the possessions that I had at 19, I left behind. And so I think in my early 20s, I kind of had a tendency to not get rid of clothes, because I was like, well, what if I need those? What if I want to wear this again? What if this is the perfect shirt for an occasion and I don't have it? And probably that was a tendency to compensate for that feeling of having left behind a lot of the possessions and feeling like the possessions made up a large part of who I was. And I think a lot of us kind of fall into that trap of thinking that the things that we acquire, the stuff that we have, is determining or makes up some part of our identity. And that's not the case, right? We have to be aware that the things that we have, that we acquire, are not part of our identity. They're just the things. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with memorabilia or keepsakes. I'm not saying that at all, but be intentional of where that's taken over and where we fall into the danger of saying, I am somebody because I have all of these things, or I have all of this jewelry, or I have all of these nice clothes. Just be mindful that our identity is not centered around the stuff. And sometimes less is more. When we learn to let go of some of the clutter, figuratively or literally, in our world, our home, our environment, our closet, we can focus more on centering identity on what matters, and that's identity in Christ, not identity in the things, the treasures that we have here on earth, right? Um, and just remembering too that as we approach the season in life, maybe you're there, maybe, I mean, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow, certainly, but if we're getting into the season of life, like, Mac and I are looking forward to the next few years when, our son got married last year and they're talking about starting a family. And so we're looking into the season of life of going into that next chapter, but also recognizing that, at some point we won't be here and somebody else is going to be going through our stuff. And so if I can be intentional about getting rid of some of the clutter on the front end so that burden doesn't fall on somebody else to have to deal with, right? And I think if we are mindful of that, don't dwell on it, don't be morbid about it, certainly, but recognize that if we start approaching that season in life where we know we're getting into some of those later chapters, we can ease that burden on the generations to come by being intentional about getting rid of some of the clutter now. Making that transition easier for somebody else who's going to come along behind us. Having those conversations about this thing is important to me because of whatever, right? If it was passing on family heirlooms, that we want to be sure that they recognize this was important to us because of why, but also being willing to accept that what is important to us may not be important for them to hold on to, and being okay with that. And so, again, those are not necessarily fun conversations to have or fun ideas to think about or thoughts to think. And yet it's a necessary part of the life cycle, is just recognizing life will come to a close because we are going on to better things, right? And so not being too caught up in the emotion of the stuff here on earth, and recognizing that we are storing up our treasures in heaven, right? At the end of the day, life is tough, but God's grace is always enough. Until next time.